Excellent. Okay, so Bill Neal is our land development zoning plating VP, but I think he's not with us. David, or is somebody else going to make that report for us tonight? Or Bruce?
Yeah, I can. So there's one huge project out on Brody Oaks that's going to go on for a long time, and it is huge. It's you know, the whole Brody Oaks shopping center is just in the very initial planning stages of what that thing's going to be, and probably it's been in the paper, and it's a big mixed use place with, you know, apartments and probably condos and restaurants and offices. The whole, it's 30 acres setting over an environmental, the most sensitive environmental area in town, on top of Barton Creek there. And that's only one corner of it, and it's on that, you know, big intersection of 360 and Lamar. And so, as probably, I think the prediction is, once that corner goes, those other corners on that big intersection are, at least they're ripe for development. And so that area out there, there's a lot of concern on how that goes in the future, and the kind of, because it'll set precedents and it will affect transit. It'll pull transit away from other parts of town or make new connections to other parts of town. It's hard to say, but it needs to be on everyone's radar, the impact that that place is going to have out there. And it's a long project. It's, you know, a 20-year kind of planning thing, a phase at a time. So that's the big one. And then there's where Gordo's Donuts on South Lamar. There's you know, a project going in there. It's 400 planned for there. It hasn't been approved. It's in the initial stages also, and it's also sets on top of Barton Creek to some extent, even though it's on Lamar. It drains down that way, some of it, and that's in the initial stages. That's like 400 and some units, and it's higher than anything else on Lamar right now, on at least that part of South Lamar. And then the last one I was going to talk about is the there's a residential building, I don't know if it's condo or not, in the initial stages for Toomey Road and Sturzing. And it's right behind Chewy's restaurant is where that is. There's an older apartment complex now. It's I think 3 stories now. And this is a taller one, and it will, if it goes up to 90 feet as planned, it will be a view from Barton Creek in the about Lunef Point, that section of Barton Creek where it goes from the dam to the river. That's going to be a visible building there. So there's a lot of opposition to that, not only from the ZNA, but from some of the other living complexes around there, and some of the landowners around there too. So those are the 3. And then there's Genie Car Wash. They got all their approvals a couple of years ago to do a thing there, and then nothing's ever happened. So I don't know what's happened with that. The Taco Pud's going up. The Schlossky's approved, hasn't started. So there's always a lot going on. Ellie had a question, Bill.
Oh.
Well, I was just going to mention the other active one right now is the proposal to build a new Doherty Arts Center on Butler Shores. And ZNA Executive Committee has taken a position on that we prefer that if it's going to be built there, that it be clustered up close to Zach Theater. And that position was backed by the Parks Board and by the Environmental Commission. But the staff was pushing to allow that new art center to be built further into the middle of the Butler Shores parkland and right up close to the lake and the trail, which would involve a lot more paving of parkland. So, and then the ZNA position also encouraged the city to look at other sites for the new Doherty Art Center that would not, convert, green parkland into, paved space. And so we've been trying to work with Councilmember Kitchen on that issue. It's supposed to come back to council for at least some sort of review at the May 6th meeting. So not this week, but next week. Are there any questions or thoughts on any of those projects?
Yeah, I have one on the Ruddy Oaks. I know that watershed protection has been for years in favor of tall buildings at that location, over the aquifer rather than spreading out. So I think that they're going to be a key player in that ZNA might want to reach out to and find out what their position is on it and how they're interacting with the planning process.
Well, I'm glad you raised that. My understanding, Bill, correct me if I'm wrong, my understanding is that Watershed and NICO, as David mentioned, there's some really important cave systems under that development. And my rumor had it that NICO and Watershed was signing off on the tall building concept and saying it probably wouldn't damage the caves underneath. And I found that kind of shocking, but I think your point is well taken. We need to really understand what they're saying and why they're saying it.
I've been hearing Mike Personette say it for years.
Mm-hmm.
that's their compromise, that it got taller, and not as spread out. So
Well,
I'm just saying, I don't know who is the right person to reach out to them, but it would be in close conversation with them.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's quite a bit of people engaged in the process, and it's early, and there's a whole lot of details that are still need to be looked into. But the initial proposal has been to shrink the impervious cover substantially.
Right.
And the way they do that is by going vertical.
Right.
And they've proposed something like 250 feet heights, which is like really high. And so I think some people understand, yes, they can go vertical, but how high is too much.
That's right.
And that location is stated in the Imagine Austin comprehensive plan to be a growth center. It's one of the few growth centers that's in the Barton Springs watershed. Yep. Almost all of the rest of them are, in other less sensitive areas. Mm-hmm. So this is the first really big redevelopment proposal. They are basically proposing to scrape everything that's there and rebuild it, although it would be in phases. So we really do need to make sure they do it right, because
the architect is from out of town, by the way.
Pardon?
The architect is from out of town, by the way, from San Antonio.
I didn't know that.
Correct. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And the planner is local, in terms of whatever. But I think it's, to me, it's equal to the Zilker Park Master Plan in terms of engagement.
Yes.
I mean, in other words, right now you're able to engage the Zilker Park Master Plan in an early stage.
Right.
Similarly, where some of these other projects, it's a lot of times we don't hear about them until it's almost too late. But this project is so big, I think there's an opportunity for ZNA to be integral to that process.
Yeah.
Well, I
Yeah.
think, I mean, I want just to put your mind at ease. I totally agree with you. And I think if it looks, because we've spent a lot of time talking in the ZNA newsletter about the Zilker Park plan, and we're kind of excited about that. I really don't want anyone to think that ZNA isn't all over this thing on multiple fronts. Bill has been heavily involved. Multiple members of the XCOM have, who are, you know, let's just say, don't want to brag or anything, but we probably have the best neighborhood level development team of experts of any neighborhood in the city. And it's not probably even close. And so, and I exclude myself, but I really hope everybody understands how deep and detailed the knowledge around growth and development issues goes. And there is a lot going on. I think maybe what you're asking for is for us to bring that forward more regularly, maybe even have a little subgroup like we do with the parks plan that's discussing it every week, putting it in the newsletter more, and really, because I understand for a lot of people that development, even though it was in Imagine Austin, it's been discussed for years, the actual coming to fruition of that project is going to permanently change our entire neighborhood, for, you know, forever. And that's not over dramatizing it. So it's really a point well taken. And Bill, you know, maybe we can take up at XCOM how to engage more people and get the conversation flowing across the neighborhood around what that really means out there.
Another factor that's come up in our discussions with other neighborhoods in this area is that the neighborhoods to the east, in fact, all the way east to I-35, are very interested in how this develops, because it is the first big development of an Imagine under the Imagine plan for a south town center sort of development, and they some of them are concerned that it will set a precedent for very high dollar development that's just not conducive or responsive to all the middle class, working class, thousands of people who live along Ben White and to the south, who actually rely on the more modest middle class shopping along Ben White, and all of those shopping centers are going downhill, have lots of vacancies, and they are very concerned about the precedent and how it will affect the new transit systems, which are actually so far planned to have their trunk lines farther to the east rather than down Lamar. So there are a lot of social issues that come into play, not just the environmental stuff.
Yes. Yeah, the transportation component will be huge for sure. And I know that Councilmember Kitchen is engaging those other neighborhoods that you mentioned, you know, on the east side of Lamar in particular. And we've specifically, with especially Robin taking the lead, have connected and are coordinating on the Brody Oaks PUD with the Barton Hills neighbors, since they're the ones right next to it.
Yeah, I also want to really, I think Lorraine's point is really important. How we set the bar, and not just for the development itself, but as Lorraine mentions, for how inclusive it is or it isn't, and also what degree of neighborhood engagement there really is. There's a lot of PR. They're already putting out a lot of PR about how the neighborhoods love this plan because, it's better for impervious cover and it's quote unquote better for the environment. And, there's a lot, of all the incredible projects that ZNA has been involved in over the year, in a way, this is the mother of all the developments we've ever had to deal with. And it's going to take every bit of that hard-won expertise that we have and the conduits to the other neighborhoods. Bobby's our ANC rep, and I think bringing in the other neighborhoods to help us think through how do we craft a really good precedent that has the inclusion and the all of the important factors baked up in it. That's a tall order, and I'm sure we're up to it, but it's a really key thing. And Bill, maybe, I don't know if there's a point person on that development, or are we taking more of a team approach, or is there something special we need to do structurally so that we can do it justice and communicate as effectively as we need to?
There might be. I don't think we have to figure that out right now, but
Okay.
that's a good question that we should address. But I think your Parks and Environment Committee and then the zoning and plating kind of overlaps there.
Definitely.
I think it'd be really, in terms of communication back out, Robin and Bill, I think it'd be really helpful to, and y'all may know this, but like you said, communication back out, exactly where they are in the process. Like, it actually makes me more concerned that you're saying that they're producing their PR, and saying that the neighborhoods are all love and all that. I don't. It'd be helpful to really understand their timeline and where we are with every newsletter. What is the point?
Mm-hmm.
And I appreciate, obviously, Ann Kitchen being on top of it and Lorraine, everybody being on top of it. But where is the point at which we demand to be part of the process, and at what scale are we part of the process?
Right.
Those are, again, just since I used to be in, I've actually retired now, but since I used to be in this business, I'm very concerned about the timing. And if they're so far along, it's very hard to turn a ship around, after it's sailed so far. And I just think it's highly, highly important. I mean, Anne may know more than anything, but actually, there's it's a Lionheart Company is the planner, Rebecca Leonard, and somebody could contact her directly and say, where are you in the process? Because she's the chief planner right there. And I don't know. These are just questions.
Yeah, no, there's meetings happening, and we're on it.
Okay.
But it is still pretty early.
Okay.
But we don't have a good timeline, and we should ask them to give us one, and then share that, and we'll do that.
Yeah, and that not it's development is dicey. It's loosey goosey. The timelines change, but
Right.
Asking them what they have produced. Have we? I'm sorry to be kind of on this because I'm coming from behind, so I'm just asking these questions that y'all already know everything about. But what have they produced so far? I think the last time I heard, which was months ago, they had different scenarios, right, that were kind of being tested. And I don't know if they came up with one scenario after those testings of different ones and who they floated those scenarios out to. I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah. I'm not sure.
Okay.
We'll follow up.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay, so at this point, we thought we would just have a fairly open discussion of neighborhood needs and priorities. This kind of grew out of some discussion with the executive committee on, what is our scope of work and what should we be paying attention to, and that we really felt like we ought to try to get some input from the general membership. I wish we had more folks on tonight, but the folks who are here can definitely weigh in. Robin's gonna moderate the section, and since the executive committee members are actively engaged, we'd really love to hear from the other members, especially about anything that it's on your mind that you're thinking about that we may not be paying attention to, or if you think we're spending too much time on something and something else is going unaddressed. So with that, Robin, do you want to jump in?
Yes, I do. So I'm hoping this can be kind of a fun discussion. We haven't really had this on the agenda for a little while, and it's really an important one. I want to build on what Bill said about how this came about, and I want to be, as always, very honest with you all. We got into a discussion at the XCOM kind of organically about whether or not we should consider endorsing or not endorsing the homeless camping ban, also known as Prop B, on your ballot during this election cycle. And it was one of the more heated discussions we've had this year, with some people on the XCOM feeling like we needed to stay out of any issue like that, that it was way out of our purview, that it was too divisive, and other people feeling like, wow, if there was ever an issue that we should weigh in on as a neighborhood association, it should be our homeless neighbors. And we did not take action on that. We agreed that we were split, that we did not have a consensus, and that we weren't going to bring that to the membership to discuss. But it brought up the larger issue of what is our scope of work. And I want to be clear that ZNA, I really meant what I said before. ZNA is the best neighborhood association in the city, and it always has been. And if you look at our website and the incredible archive on there, how much work has gone into evaluating new developments and understanding what their impacts would be on traffic and flooding, and working the detailed elements of that. I mean, it's really an incredible knowledge base that ZNA has built up. And my understanding is that over the decades, that's been a very, very large part of the work of ZNA, is in that larger sort of development category. And when we started to stray in some people's minds over to talking about issues like homelessness, talking about issues around public safety and public safety reform, there was a little bit of pushback on the XCOM. And so what we decided to do was to simply really open it up for you guys to say, and you've already started it tonight. We've already talked about the need for better outreach. We've already talked about the need to focus more and more publicly on the Brody Oaks redevelopment. Are there other priorities that you guys think that we should focus on? We don't want to debate the priorities tonight. This is not debate team time. This is, when you really think about our neighborhood association, are there things, as the neighborhood's changed and as we've changed, are there things that we should be doing that we haven't really been doing before? Are there things we've been doing that we don't need to do anymore? And I really do want this to be, should we be talking more about climate? Should we be talking more about public safety? Should we be talking more about homelessness and mental health? I'd really love for you to tell us. And how we're going to do this is, if you just raise your hand, I'll call on you so we're not talking all over each other. And if no one raises their hand, I'll probably call on someone anyway. So you might as well raise your hand if you have a thought. If you're not comfortable talking, Anne Marie, you're going to go next. If you're not comfortable talking, you can use the chat to make a comment about priorities. All right. So Anne Marie, your thoughts on our priorities?
Well, thank you for raising the issue. I think it's really big. And I think it goes back to the broader discussion we had early on with regard to engagement. I think understand what is our mission and our purpose and how do we engage and what is the incentive for people to get engaged? And that's a broad, big discussion. But with regard to the issues related to individuals experiencing homelessness, I think as a neighborhood association, I think it's perfectly within our group purview to engage with organizations like foundation communities. You know, they've got the big property, they're going to be developing the one next door. I think I'm very comfortable with engaging with other organizations with regard to issues that we care about as a community and as an organization. I am uncomfortable talking about, for example, like Prop B. I think that's everyone's going to have an opinion about that. And that's a private decision that people are going to be making. However, as a collective, I think that we can be talking about broader issues by engaging other organizations like foundation communities.
So if I'm understanding you right, it's really prioritizing on relationships and where other groups are taking the lead, that we might team up with them as opposed to charting a path kind of solely from the neighborhood perspective. Am I getting that right?
Yes, and the reason I bring up foundation communities, they are part of our community. They're part of who we are. So let's engage collectively with them. I think that's very appropriate. I feel very comfortable doing that.
Fantastic comment. All right, who else has a comment about priorities here?
Can I just get a point of clarification on that one? I'm familiar with the foundation communities facility that's on the east side of Lamar. But is there it sounded like you were referencing another one.
They're going to be building another one on property very nearby to where they're currently built. I'm not exactly sure what the address is, but I think there's a lot that I think they're going to be building more units on a nearby.
It's next door to Planet K. So I don't want to sidetrack us here, but just another point of clarification. I'll go so far as to say the ZNA is responsible for that new location next to Planet K. I mean, we put that over the top.
It's a good point, David. And ZNA has a lot to be proud of in terms of, some neighborhoods have a reputation for being very anti-affordable housing projects of that type. And ZNA has a really strong track record of not only supporting it, but being very proactive in that support. So that's a point well taken. Who else has a comment on priorities? I guess, Dan, would you like to go next?
Yeah, so I guess maybe first my quick point about foundation communities is they have, I think, over 30 different properties around the city. So it's not a small scale operation by any means. But in terms of maybe more of the conversation not around Prop B, but as it relates to homelessness in its current, in the ordinance that currently exists already, is that, there are two specific places you can't camp, which are around City Hall and in public parks. And during, former Police Chief Manley's time, he removed, I believe, 31 positions from the Austin Park Rangers. And currently there aren't any police officers who are working with PARD to enforce that ordinance. So
actually, it was PARD. Just to be factual about it, PARD requested that APD take that over because the PARD Rangers do not like confrontation, did not feel they had the training, and just simply didn't want to deal with it. But instead of going back through the history, because there's a whole long trail of discussion about the enforcement around PARD rules, whether it's homelessness, dogs off the leash, containers, drunk and disorderly. Well, in a minute, when we get to parks, we could talk about that. But was your point that we should expand our focus to include something like homelessness, or to stay more development, physical structure focused?
I was, first of all, thanks for the context there. Definitely, I've been hearing that it's now more of an issue with PARD, that they'd rather have something happening, whereas right now nothing is. So thank you. I do think priority wise, we should focus on, keeping the park and that as top of our list.
Okay, that's a really good point. And just a quick show of hands, I got a kind of an extreme number of calls this weekend about the sort of out of control nature of Zilker Park. And I don't know if we have a lot of people concerned about that, if that should be sort of a low priority or a sky high priority. If you feel like that issue of just roguery going on at the park, whether it's parking or dogs or just sort of mass confusion, is that a priority for the group or not so much? Just raise your hand if that should be a high priority. Okay, seems like at least 4 or 5 people. Okay, who else has a comment?
I'm curious, what are the issues that you're hearing about in Zilker? I mean, we go there quite a bit, but we go to the springs and spend a little time there and then we leave.
Well, the kind of thing, Bill was down there. Somebody had an actual full-on concert there. The people are parking, the pictures people are sending of how people are parking on the sidewalks and on the actual trail, on the actual parkland, the disorderliness in general. And it's at certain times of the week you can go and it's all quiet like it usually used to be, and at some times of the week it looks like Disneyland on a really crowded, busy, crazy day with no one there taking tickets or anything. It's really quite a range. Dogs off the leash, people not feeling safe with their kids and the dogs. It's just kind of a variety of issues. Is what I'm hearing.
I guess this kind of feeds into, my comment on your question, which I think is a good question. I really appreciate what the committee's been doing over the last few years and will continue to do on things like zoning and housing, and actually okaying the zoning or supporting the zoning of low-cost housing that we're putting up and other things. And I think it's a balance between more strategic and more tactical day-to-day kinds of things that the group has to balance. But I think if you really want to get the attention of the neighborhood, things like the Heather Street water problem that I know Bill and Bruce are working on with Ann. God knows if anything will ever happen there, but those kinds of things like Zilker Park, if there are problems there, things like the lack of walkability in our neighborhood and the danger that we're experiencing walking on the streets now, trying to walk. And I think that impacts all 10,000 people in the neighborhood, not just the 250 members. And so I think we have to balance what are the day-to-day things that will really improve our neighborhood today or next month versus 5 years from now when they're going to build, a major development. And I leave it up to you guys to decide that. But I think there's a lot of tactical things that need to get resolved here. This neighborhood is changing quickly. And focusing too much time on Brody Oaks, I understand it's important, but I don't know how much we can really impact that kind of development.
Yeah, it remains to be seen. I think that in your comments, which were excellent, I think part of what I'm hearing is maybe a focus more on tactical mobility. The problem with Brody Oaks, among many other things, is the impact on traffic, which is already pretty horrendous at least at certain times of the day. How that affects the traffic situation. I think I'm hearing more tactical mobility as a possible priority. Am I right about that?
Yeah, I wouldn't call it mobility. I didn't realize that's the way it's called. It's referred to, but yeah.
Well, we can call it lots of things. That's a great comment. Who else has a comment on priorities? Yes, Dorsey.
Okay. This may be from left field, and I don't know if this is the place to ask it, nor do I know if it's something that we would be involved in. but I have the question, so I'm going to jump in. And it has to do with property taxes. I'm sure you're well aware that everybody in Zilker and Barton Hills, and I imagine many other places, the rise in the property taxes, the appraisals. I've been a lot of emails going back and forth. Is that an area that our neighborhood association can have any kind of input or any kind of discovery of what might be done? Or is this outside of our boundaries?
Right now, Dorsey, I don't think right now we think tonight, there's nothing outside. We want to hear from you, as you just said. That's certainly an issue that affects every single person in the neighborhood, with the possible exception of renters. And even then it has an indirect impact. So I think for tonight, we're not really debating whether it should be in or out. We just want to know that you care.
Great. Yeah,
and that's
care.
a key.
I care, and it seems like a lot of my neighbors care too.
Good point. All right, so we've got that down as possible in scope. Garrett?
Speaking to Dorsey's comment, I think, as a neighborhood association, that's pretty tricky, right? Because the taxes are being, calculated with metrics that take into account the whole city and the county values. It'd be more difficult to wade into that issue with the goal of just getting our property taxes lowered, I think, versus if we just said, hey, as a neighborhood association, we have some proposal on how to completely rework the entire property tax system or code, and joining forces with other neighborhoods and recognizing how it's forcing long-time residents, both renters and homeowners, out of their homes, the stress and strain it puts, having your old home compared to brand new construction in terms of values, and just creating a lot of stress, where just by no fault of our own, by just continuing to live in your home. I think it's definitely a huge issue. I'm just not sure how, as a neighborhood association, we would get into that discussion, in the future. But I agree that it's a huge issue, and I haven't opened my other little letters because I don't want to read it, and I don't want to deal with it.
Well, I do think this may be where Anne Marie was talking about before. This is a topic where, but on our own, we may not be able to do that much, but creating the kind of partnerships and alliances. I know this is a topic ANC at times has advocated for. I think just knowing it's important to you guys and knowing that if we could have some impact you might want us to is really important. Neil, did you want to make a comment about priorities?
No, I'm pretty good. I kind of, I like what I'm hearing, no neighborhood is an island sort of thing. And, you've got to pay attention and connect. So I'm liking that. And Dorsey and I have been talking about the taxes. So she speaks for both of us, saying what the hell's going on. So, whatever happens.
All right. Good point. Who else has a comment on priorities? Let's go, Bobby.
Okay, I'm unmuted now. I agree with what Anne Marie said and what others too, but banking on what she said, I believe that it's, I have a great appreciation for and hope it continues that the Zilker Neighborhood Association's executive committee level, which we meet more frequently, and as we saw earlier on just the numbers of the question is outstanding about why do we have, I thought it was 3,500 households. I'm not sure how many over 18 members could be potentially there, but we don't have but a smidgen of that 300, or so at the highest. And we don't have enough volunteer effort. And I really appreciate the volunteer efforts that volunteers that have come forward tonight. But on issues that are confrontational or somehow political, and some people want to avoid those, as far as the scope of what we do, it was important because it's at the crux of democracy that we oppose the proposition about the strong mayor. The Austin Neighborhoods Council did too. Both of those were, just far and away well, theirs was unanimous. Absolutely. We had no, well, anyway, the point is that there were 8 propositions and we only took on one of them. And we thought it was most important. Some of the issues, and there are some like Prop B, that throughout, the last decade or two, it's gotten more and more controversial. I think the issues, maybe not, but these things are, sometimes they add more heat than light. I don't know what difference is going to make one way or the other on Prop B. I have a very strong opinion about being opposed to it, but I understand other people have different opinions. I have one brother I typically call it to find out the other side of any issue in the world. And I've lost that in the Trump era, but I think that it's going to happen again in the near future. And so if you just allow the executive committee to decide which ones are most critical, they meet more often, they are all engaged. This is something that we could just look at the future, and it looks like it's really worked in the past. We invite people to come to, which is Zoom these days for maybe another few months, invite people, members to join us on Zoom and listen, and they can put their 2 cents worth in on any subject. If there's something, if it's not on the agenda, they can at least speak up as like general communications. They have a little time to put in for that. And so I just want everybody to know that the executive committee really has worked in the background, and there's a cross section of a range of ideas on any subject that make it so the group really does work. And the group dynamic is what Linus Pauling said was the best way to have an idea is a lot of ideas. We get a lot of ideas. We get at the cross section. So I just wanted to let everybody know and, wave a victory flag that we have been doing this in the past, and it should continue. So.
Thanks, Bobby. Well, why don't we do this? Because we have at least one more fairly sizable agenda item to get through regarding our bylaws. But in terms of priorities, something that the XCOM is thinking seriously about doing, Bill mentioned actually canvassing our neighborhood on foot, the parts that can be canvassed. And that's in the works. We're waiting until the COVID settles down just a little bit more, but we're planning a ZNA in-person canvas, not just to drop off the newsletter, but to actually engage a little bit. The other thing we've been talking a lot about in the Parks Committee and also at the XCOM is the idea of actually doing a neighborhood-wide survey so that we can understand more outside the membership, but inside our neighborhood, what the priorities are, what people are thinking about, what they want us to do, whether or not they want to join, all those kinds of issues. So we'll be looping back with you on that. Well, before we end this, is there anyone else that just had a burning need to make a priority comment? I guess a couple people real quick. Al, you first, then Garrick, and then we'll go to bylaws.
Well, since there are so many new people relatively in the neighborhood, I think it's important to somehow in the flyers or whatever you're doing to state what has been stated here tonight, like the depth of ZNA in terms of what it's done through the years, right? So not just assume that people understand this, because they don't. They may have never been part of a neighborhood association ever, much less understanding how much ZNA has done in the past and what it has the ability to do for someone in the future.
That's a really good point. Thanks for making it. Garrett, real quick.
One thing that we did in the SRCC that I thought was pretty successful for membership was to put out signs, a day or two before the meetings. And that's back in-person meetings were the in thing. But it makes you aware that it exists, even if it's just the website address that you can go check out more information. And aside from that, one thing I think that should always remain a priority given our location within the city, and I know this is a priority, but I just want to emphasize it, is the preservation of our parks, open space, and natural areas. It's a main thing. It's the reason why I've always wanted to live in Zilker, is being close to Barton Creek and Barton Springs and Town Lake, and to lose those things to constant pressure and development whether it just be a degradation of the experience or just it being wiped out entirely to build a building or whatever, I think is a travesty. And that's, I think, one of the defining factors of our neighborhood is our proximity to those resources. And we should definitely be fighting tooth and nail to preserve that. And I believe we're doing that, but I just it should always be at the top of the list.
Oh, thanks, Garrett. Okay, you guys. Well, thank you for helping us at least start this conversation. If you're thinking and you come up with other priorities, you can put them in the chat. You can email your XCOM. You can call any one of us anytime. I'm sure this won't be the last time we talk as a group about priorities, but this is a really good start. It really helps us so much. So, Bill, you want to take the next section on bylaws?
I think so, yeah. Just 2 quick comments on that last section. First, thank you so much, Dorsey, for raising the property appraisal issue. We will definitely think about that and see if there's a way we might engage, at least provide useful information to everybody, because it's definitely got, the appraisals have everybody's attention right now. That's for sure.
I just thought of something too. If the association were able to take the zone in any form, what a great way to advertise the association, because
Right.
every single home is being affected, and the new
Right.
people, the old people, the in-between people, it would just be,
Right.
yeah,
They would appreciate it, no doubt.
you get their
Yes.
attention.
And then, on the Heather and Lamar issue, I'm so glad that was mentioned. We kind of skipped by that. They are, and Bruce can correct me if I'm wrong here, but the city's insisting that they're going to shut down Heather in just the next few days for about a week while there's some construction that would get the water off of the sidewalk. It won't get it off of the street where it flows across Heather. They're hoping that it will at least have it flow across Heather in a way that doesn't pond or further diminish the asphalt and the road, the soundness of the road. So we won't know until they're done, but they insist that's supposed to be done by May 6th or 7th. Isn't that right, Bruce?
Well, they said it's supposed to be done by May 1st. I don't know. I don't think they have a clue as to when it'll be done. They just pushed back our meeting 3 weeks, though, saying they hoped that construction had started by the time they had their meeting.
Okay.
Mike and I walked by there yesterday, and they had indeed removed one of the trees along the curb and dug it out. So it looks like they have started the construction on that fake, the fake parking space that's supposed to receive all the water.
Right.
Bill, what exactly are they going to do?
Well, what they're saying is they're going to put the water in a pipe underground as it's run, and rather than have it run down the sidewalk, along Heather. And then they're going to try to, basically contour the pavement on Heather itself so that even though it's still running across Heather to get, to the more northerly side where it runs down the curb and into the drain inlet. That's sort of this interim fix or partial fix that they're doing that they insist will be done. I think we just have to see what it looks like when they're done to see how bad, or how good of a job they do addressing that issue of the water crossing the street itself.
I will just make the comment that there's going to be continuing water going down the gutter all the time and crossing Heather. And hopefully it won't cross Heather right in the middle of the crosswalk, but it will continue to flow for the next 2 or 3 or 4 years. Their long-term plan is to build a storm sewer that's going to run from along Heather, probably starting at about Kinney, and running across Lamar down south, down Mary and emptying into Bolden Creek.
Wow. That's a big job.
Yeah. Okay. So let's
yeah.
Let's move on to the bylaw issue. The important thing about the proposed bylaws amendments, to just so everybody's clear, is we're not taking any action tonight. Our bylaws require us to disclose proposed amendments of the bylaws in writing to the general membership at the meeting before we vote on it. So we'll be voting on them at the next meeting in the summer. And I'm forgetting that exact date.
End of July.
And so they're on the ZNA website. There's a bylaws section. They're printed out there. There's a longer one that sort of has a bunch of editorial changes that's in a red line. And that's the bigger amendment that was recommended by the XCOM, and I'll let the bylaw committee speak to that for a minute if they'd like to. And then there's two smaller ones that if the larger ones pass, the other ones would be considered as potential amendments to that larger amendment. If the larger amendment doesn't pass, then those two smaller ones that are not yet recommended and may not be, would be considered as amendments to the existing bylaws. So with that, Dave, you want to speak to the larger one that's recommended by the XCOM?
Sure. So I'm not going to, I have about half a dozen major points and to just let you know about. I'm not going to get too deep into them or even get the wording of them. Like I say, Bill said, they're posted on the website in a red line edition, so you can see the changes. So this is all came about from it was triggered by the pandemic, and I didn't know what Zoom was before the pandemic started, and we needed a way to do Zoom meetings, and this is just explicit. One of these bylaws changes explicitly says we can. It's kind of inferred before, and so as Bill said, there was a bylaws committee of myself, Bruce, and Garrett, who's on here, and Drew Zerdecki, and so we took a kind of a run at it a couple of times and did a lot of changes, and then it went to the XCOM. We did some more changes, and so there's this, like Bill said, there's a pretty large red line version, and so I'm going to cover some of that stuff here. So one thing. Okay, so one of the things that's new is on the way resolutions are presented to be voted on, and there's just a little language on that, and it if you have 25 members get together, they can present a resolution. That's new, and there's some notification periods on when you have to do that kind of thing. There's a change in the nominations for officers if they come from the general membership. But it used to be 1 week before the meeting to be voted on. Now it's 1 week before the XCOM meeting, before the general meeting. We just needed more time for that whole process in order to get people in there and get them notified. And it was too compressed before that whole process. That's a change. The same way with for officer elections. For people to vote, members to vote, we just came out, and our proposed is to you just have to be paid up before September 30th. So the officer election is at the end of October, and we're just saying you have to be paid up member by September 30th to be able to vote. Also, we ended up last election, officer election, we voted by mail. And we also had a drop box. And so we explicitly put that into the bylaws for these amendments. As I said, we're explicitly said we can conduct meetings virtually like we're doing right now. And the last change I have here is, the ad hoc committees may be created by the executive committee. Before that was the president. So there's a proposed change there. And that's all I have for the bylaws.
And we'll get additional information out, before that next meeting when there is the vote on it.
Yeah, and as Bill said, those are the bylaws that came from the bylaws committee. Those were voted on by the XCOM to approve, and then Bill's got a couple of additions here.
Yeah, and I won't go into that. I want us to get to our park discussion. But they're on the website there, and we'll have plenty of time to address them before the vote 90 days from now. Okay. So Robin is our chair of our Parks and Environment Committee. And so Robin, will you jump in and give folks kind of a summary of where we are with the vision plan and what folks need to know?
Yes, I'll try to do this quickly. By the way, the main thing I want you to know is if anyone here would like to join the Parks and Environment Committee, we would love to have you. And all you have to do is let any one of us know that you're interested, and we'd seriously love to have you. It's a great group. We're doing some really, I think we're doing some really in-depth work, sort of true ZNA style. Where we are with the plan is, if you have been following along in the newsletter, or even if you haven't, the contractor, we love the contractor. The contractor has a great reputation in the Hill Country. They did the plan for Blue Hole out in Dripping Springs, did a fabulous job and got rave reviews from our environmental colleagues out there. So the contractor was selected. The contract has actually been signed. And the first of the small group meetings are starting to be scheduled. Bill will be attending the first one is I think an environment meeting. The immediate neighborhood meeting is being set up. We expect that invitation to come out in the next couple of weeks. So we're starting to actually have the conversations about the plan. We have not been waiting for those meetings. We've been looking at everything from the process and community engagement aspects of the planning process. We had some real kind of heartburn about the way they were approaching it. We're looking, of course, at environmental, climate issues. There are a bunch of really gnarly transportation issues, everything from the bridge to the parking, to the illegal parking, to the need for just better trail markings and wayfinding. The transportation part of this is extremely important. Bill has been spearheading a look at the amenities, the corporate sponsorships, the need for and expressed interest in new revenue opportunities. There's a focus on the new visitor center that's being proposed. We've looked at all of these issues at least somewhat, and have started to prepare actual position papers. Also, we've just got our first draft of sort of what is ZNA's vision of what Zilker Park should become in the future. And so I don't want to go too deeply into it, but I feel like we're well prepared going into the meetings. If I have a concern personally, it's that the whole Zilker Park planning process, which I initially thought was going to be a 2-year process, they're condensing it down into a 1-year process. What's good about that is, it's kind of showtime and all systems go and we're all over it. potential downside of that is looking at the magnitude of what's in the scope of work. I'd be hard pressed to understand how they could get all that done and done at a high quality in 1 year. But we're game to try, and it'll be exciting to see what that looks like. Trying to go into it with, I wouldn't say a skeptical point of view, but for a lot of us, this isn't the first rodeo. So we're trying to be very clear in what our vision is and how we see the various issues, but we understand that there are other much bigger forces at play and other agendas going on, and we're trying to see the whole field as it really is, not just the way we want it to be. So with that, does anybody have any specific questions about the plan or the timing of the plan?
Robin?
Yes.
Is there anyone on the committee who's communicating with Ann Kitchen or other council members about the resolution that was put forward last week about, it sounded like it had a lot to do with transportation planning and Butler Shores specifically in relation to Zilker Park. Is that going to be is that going to be a guiding document for the master plan, or are they completely separate?
My understanding, Bill and others correct me if I'm wrong, my understanding is that, first of all, Ann Kitchen and her team have been very accessible and very present. We asked for and received some crime statistics about Zilker Park that Ann Kitchen's office was very helpful in delivering for us, for example. I believe that resolution had more to do with what Bill was talking about before with the PAR development and how that's playing out, and the idea that there's going to be a cultural district up over on Butler Shores. And right this moment, I don't know how that's going to dovetail with ZNA, but we're in pretty good dialogue. I don't know, Bill, do you have any further comment on that?
No, you're right. I mean, unless Lorraine's aware of some resolution we missed, but the resolution that was on the council agenda for last week and got punted till next week just only dealt with Butler Shores. And they are viewing that, at least so far, as outside and separate from the scope of the Zilker Park planning process. But it could be viewed as sort of an omen of things to come, in the idea that they're not valuing the parkland as green space, but rather as a place to build more buildings and park more cars. And so from that perspective, it's rather concerning, if not disturbing.
Right. The other thing I'll just say, so if you have questions about the park plan or what the Parks Committee is doing, if you want to attend, the Parks Committee right now is meeting twice a month on Wednesday nights by Zoom. So if anyone wants to sit in and observe, if anyone wants to volunteer, absolutely love to have you. The only other thing I'll mention, Gail is not on this particular Zoom, but the idea came up at our last week meeting, and it dovetails nicely in what you all were talking about in terms of needing more outreach and more communications. And Bill touched on it. The idea of having organized, I don't want to call them social gatherings, but sort of ways for neighbors to connect and actually be outside, be in nature, commune together, learn about the incredible natural world that is our neighborhood and is Zilker Park. Gail's actually putting together a game plan for us to host some walk the neighborhood, walk the park, bike the park outings for ZNA members. And we'll probably have a trial period. I know it's getting to be the hot part of the summer, but there's been some requests for that. And there's been the idea that might help us. Not everybody likes to come to meetings, whether they're Zoom or in person, but some people really seem to like to get out and about and meet each other. So trying to marry up the social with the you know, the educational and learning is kind of something we're gravitating towards. Any other questions while we're on the parks topic? Okay, the only other thing I'll say is we do have a new, I think you guys are aware, we have now got a dog squad. Garrett, who's on this call, and also Robert Corbin, who is on this call. The two of them, we have dog issues in the neighborhood, in Little Zilker, in Big Zilker, and everywhere in between. And the two of them have agreed to sort of work through some solutions and sort of be the focal point. The Parks Committee didn't feel like they could handle it. We have so much else going on the plate. But I really appreciate Robert and Garrett for coming up with the idea of having a dog squad and helping us sort through the sometimes divisive issues about what to do with our pets. So if you have questions about on or off leash dogs or any aspects of that, they're our guys, and I really appreciate them stepping up. And with that, Bill, I think that ends my report.
Are there any people want to weigh in just with comments of like priorities you'd like to see us pay attention to, or what you'd like to see come out of the plan? There'll be lots of time for further discussion on this, and we do want to, hopefully we'll get a neighborhood survey out, but if there are issues that you're really concerned about with the park and want to express those now or opinions, please speak up.
Well, I really appreciate y'all looking at, green space versus built space. I think that, quantifying that, or I guess what I'm saying is, remember Larry Akers, when he was doing everything down there on gosh, I'm sorry, I'm losing it here, but yeah, there was
Auditorium Shores area.
Auditorium Shores, and how there was such an effort to kind of save as much green space and yet have a building and parking. And I don't, the issue is, I think, is there's no principle. There's no guiding principle as to how much building and how much parking. So yes, we could say we want all green space and not building and parking, but there's always going to be pressure. There has been pressure ever since Frederick Law Olmsted in Central Park in New York to put buildings and parking into green space. And so, it seems like that we really need, as a city, to have some kind of guiding principle, that it's not just every 10 years there's another building and another parking that comes in. Where is the guiding principle that will define it for a long time? I think that's really what I see, the lack of leadership in the city parks department, right? And they're just kind of wanting to bend whatever is the current desire, right? Rather than what is the long-term vision and how can we have some guiding principles and metrics about that. So I just appreciate y'all doing that.
I'm seeing a lot of heads nodding around that. And like I said, we're drafting. Bill took the first swing at it. We've got quite a few written ideas, but we're going to circulate that soon. And I think you'll see we're trying to say these are the values. This is the vision that we have. Here's how we want to be inclusive, but also stand for something, and not just have it be a total free-for-all, which seems to be the way it is now. So really appreciate your comments, and we'll be looking for your feedback on our sort of guiding principles, vision, and priorities document going forward.
Yeah, I would just say I agree completely. There's a lack of vision and leadership from the Parks Department itself, despite the fact that they just completed a sort of comprehensive citywide long-range parks plan that has some good guidance in it. But I'd go further on a couple points. One, we're not seeing the leadership and vision that we need from the city council on these issues. And and in my view, that would involve a recognition that with our skyrocketing population in the central city, we need to be figuring out how to peel up pavement and take buildings out of our parks and restore more green space, rather than trying to figure out, how to take more parkland and convert it to parking garages, which is partly this Butler Shores idea. And there's a big push, as most folks probably know, to make that bandit parking area in the park that's just huge and a big mess. If you haven't been over there, you should look. Between the Zilker Botanical Gardens and the lake, to make that a permanent giant parking area. So, we have a real problem there. And part of it too is we have this proliferation now of these park conservancies, where in my view, there's a disconnect between the goals of the conservancies, where PARD is now sort of ceding a lot of management authority to these park conservancies in some of our parks, Waller Creek, Pease Park, for example, Zilker Botanical Gardens. And those nonprofits and their donors, they have their priorities, and they don't always line up with what the public priorities are for the parklands, and quite specifically on the issue of, building things that they can put wealthy donors' names on. Versus, restoring habitat or preserving, green play areas. So, there's a challenge here, and the write-up of the consultant scope of work suggests that they want to make more money and accommodate more and more visitors. And, that's in conflict with what we think most Zilker neighbors want. That most of us want more green space and less parking and fewer buildings. But that's where we really want to hear from people. And as Robin said, they're on a fast timeline. So these next few months are going to be really critical.
Well, thanks. I think Dan, is that your hand up? Did you want to make a comment? Or are you high-fiving?
No, I did have my hand up, but I'll give anyone a high five who wants to. Yeah, so I mentioned it earlier, but definitely I've heard from people who work in Zilker Park, they now feel unsafe from people who are now living there in the park. So it's definitely something that I find hard to square around, that people who come in should feel safe.
Yeah, I should have said the public safety issues. I didn't, when we first started looking at the Zilker Park vision plan, I really didn't think that the public safety and enforcement issues were going to be, I pictured us talking, a lot, a lot about climate and, watershed and, environment stuff. The actual public safety and enforcement issues of even the rules we do have, let alone, new guidances, it's really been it's really come up in the committee as a very important topic, and so we'll be looking at that in the midst of everything else. But anyway, I think we're over time. Bill, I do want to just say, even if you can't come to the park committee meetings, if you just want to be on the email list, we do take pretty good meeting summary notes. If you just want to be on the email list, if you're even just a little interested, let us know. We'd really love to just have as much engagement around this as we possibly can. Go ahead, Bill.
I think that's covered, unless anybody has any final urgent comments to put in. We were hoping to finish up by 8, and it's 8:05.
Everybody vote.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, thanks everyone. Really appreciate it, and look forward to having an in-person meeting, if at all possible, for our next general meeting in about 90 days. All right, take care. Stay safe.
Okay, thank you.
Good night, all. Thank you.
Bye.